is forgive me if I forget anything. I read this book, I finished reading it like a week ago and I forgot to make a video. I just did like a rough draft video, so I pretty much spoke to my monitor this video before I did this video. But yes, the book. Dun, 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 dun. Yes, I'm going to do that from now on with all books. If you don't like it, screw you. That's what I say. It's The Mystery of Consciousness by Searle. And I'll start off with something a little bit more superficial. This cover makes no freaking sense. What the hell? There's no Eastern mysticism in there. What's with the third eye? A computer and a brain, that would have made more sense. Because to get into the book, the main theme of this book is basically, is the computer like the brain? And is the brain like the computer? Or basically more the consciousness. Is consciousness like software, and the brain the hardware, the same way that computers have software and hardware? He starts off saying what consciousness is, but basically in all of his chapters he's responding or comparing his views to somebody else. Each chapter is like that, and sometimes it's I hate this guy or I agree with this guy or whatever. But basically consciousness is it's like this ability to map information outside of the brain. It's also two types of memory, normal and special memory. And special memory is memory of processes, and you have to be able to remember processes and facts to be able to learn, which is the last little tidbit of what consciousness is. Searle's main view is that consciousness comes from the brain, its processes and whatnot. The brain does stuff, consciousness comes about. Pretty awesome. This is going to start off boring. I'll warn you about that, but it gets pretty crazy halfway through. But yes, that's what consciousness is. And Searle says the consciousness is nothing like a computer. The problem is that computers, they don't have the subjective experiences we have. This is Searle's analogy. It's called the Chinese room analogy. This is on page 11. I have illustrated this point with a simple thought experiment. Imagine that you carry out the steps in a program for answering questions in a language you do not understand. I do not understand Chinese, so I imagine that I am locked in a room with a lot of boxes of Chinese symbols, the database. I get small bunches of Chinese symbols passed to me, questions in Chinese. And I look up in a rule book, the program, what am I supposed to do? Or what I am supposed to do. I perform certain operations on the symbols in accordance with the rules. That is, I carry out the steps in the program and give back small bunches of symbols, answers to the questions, to those outside the room. I am the computer implementing a program for answering questions in Chinese. But all the same, I do not understand a word of Chinese. And this is the point. If I do not understand Chinese solely on the basis of implementing a computer program for understanding Chinese, then neither does any other digital computer solely on that basis, because no digital computer has anything I do not have. And that's basically the point, is that we have subjective experiences. When we speak English, we understand what English means. We understand the feeling of the words. Like when I say tree, I can think of a tree, experience a tree. I have a subjective experience about the tree. But computers don't have subjective experiences. Tree is just a word that has like parameters around it. In this situation, you use this word. That's basically how a computer works. So the human brain's a bit more than a computer. It's basically his argument. And then he goes on to attack several other people, and he categorizes the different types of arguments that people have, different types of views. First is strong AI. Basically, the brain is like a computer. That's it. Computer brain, same damn thing, different thing that it is in. Weak AI, which is what Searle is that brain processes cause consciousness, and these processes can be simulated by a computer, but there's some part of us that can't be computerized, so to speak. Another one is that third argument, brain process causes consciousness, but they can never be, none of our brain can really be simulated on a computer. The last one is consciousness cannot be explained scientifically by any means at all. Which we'll get into the crazy thing called panpsychism, which is basically the idea that everything is conscious. Which is crazy. It's so crazy. That's what I'm going to talk about now. There's one of the guys in this book, I think it's David Chalmers, but it's been a while since I read this book, but given this what I've read, I believe it's Chalmers, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the idea that everything is consciousness, or everything has consciousness, which is sounds crazy, and Searle thinks it's crazy, and pretty much everyone else thinks it's crazy because it's really out there. Yeah, Chalmers. Basically, Chalmers says that consciousness is information. Like rain coming down and whatnot, the rain has information in it, H2O. It also has the process of falling. It has all these things in it. So it's consciousness. The Chalmers example is a thermostat. Thermostats have information. They tell you what temperature it is. Therefore, it's conscious. But Searle is like, that's BS. Not everything is conscious. Because Searle's argument is that only humans and maybe non-human animals. I think he mentions non-human animals being conscious too. I believe they are. But basically, only they can be conscious. And that if everything is conscious, then really nothing is conscious, because consciousness doesn't really mean anything. And also consciousness there's several things in consciousness that are important. That subjective experience is one important criteria. Thermostats don't have subjective experiences. I know, shocker, thermostats don't have experiences. Oh, I didn't know this. Did you know that? I didn't know. I'm shocked. Yes, basically that's why thermostats aren't conscious. They don't have experiences. They don't have memory. They don't know processes. They can't learn. And in all this, just because there's information in something doesn't make it conscious. So that's how the extreme pulls. You have Daniel Dennett over here. We're just like computers. We don't have subjective experiences. Subjective experiences, illusions. Emotions are illusions, just created by our chemistry. Way over here, you have David Chalmers with panpsychism. Everything is consciousness. Sounds like some David Icke type New Age hippie type stuff. Then I think in the middle you got John's or Searle. Consciousness exists only in living things. You can simulate some of it with computers, but not all of it. And overall, consciousness is confined to simply humans. Only humans are consciousness. Not our consciousness. We have consciousness. Our body isn't just consciousness. Part of us is not consciousness. But Searle does find someone in here that he like halfway agrees with. I forget where he disagrees with, but he has some kind of disagreement, and that's with Roger Penrose. He has some agreement with Roger Penrose. I still have to admit that I don't know if I understood this one, because this involves the Gödel incompleteness proof. The Gödel incompleteness proof, yes. Which is basically, if you tell a computer to find an odd number that when you add up two even numbers equals this odd number, the computer will go on searching forever, because no number exists. And that's sort of the difference between humans, people of consciousness, and computers who don't have consciousness. Is that we as humans, we understand what those mean, what it means. We can think creatively and have sort of experience of, okay, no number exists, so I'm not even going to try. Whereas computer, you tell it, keep counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 until you find an odd number, in which when you add up two even numbers equals it. The computer will go on and on and on for infinity, because computers don't understand. They're not conscious. They have no consciousness. So it reminds me of Deep Blue. He brings up Deep Blue a lot. You know, that awesome hardcore freaking, chess computer thing that beat a hardcore dude at chess, and people are like, oh no, computers are gonna take over. And Searle's like, no, they're not. It's just, they've simply been taught how to compute chess moves. It's not conscious. It's basically a glorified calculator. Just a chess calculator, pretty much, is what Deep Blue is. So he's not consciousness. It wasn't a big deal. I need to stop saying consciousness. He doesn't have consciousness. That seems to be it. You got way over here, panpsychism, Daniel Dennett, and then Penrose and Searle, not really the same, kind of both in the middle. This overall was a good book. It's about 200 some odd pages. The two authors he disagrees with the most are in the book. What happens is Searle will make an argument against them, and then that person writes an angry, you're wrong, I'm right, letters to this philosophy publication, and then it gets published here, and then Searle does his attack on the attack. So it's basically Daniel Dennett and Chalmers will come up with something, Searle will attack it, and then they will counterattack, and then Searle will counterattack, and you get the last three of that. The attack, counter, and counterattack. So yes, you get lots. It's not just Searle having a I'm awesome fest. Lots of views are in this thing, and it's a really good introduction to philosophy of mind. But if you really want to understand philosophy of mind, I've sort of realized that you need to read more than just this book. You have to read the other guys too, because it only gets you in there. Oh, there was another tangent in there that didn't really seem. It kind of fit, but not really. And that's the whole problem of. Let me see what time it is real fast. I got like 3 minutes, so I'm good. Mind-body duality. That's the thing that freaks people out, that nobody likes. And I don't know if any mind-body dualists exist anymore. Not very many. I assume it's not a very popular an idea. Basically, according to this book, when mind-body dualism was created way back when, it was created as a compromise between the church and the philosopher/scientists. Because they were worried that if they just say everything is physical and they go straight towards materialism, the church would be like, oh yeah, well, screw you, and excommunicate them or something. So what they did was they said, well, most of everything is matter, but there's also mind, soul type thing too. So the mind, soul does exist. Here you go, church of whatever. Soul does exist. There's the soul and matter in us. So we're part soul, part matter. But time has passed now, and the church doesn't really have that much power, so no compromise is necessary, and no one really accepts that anymore. But the problem is with consciousness is that people feel like you either have to go with materialism, which people fear will lead straight to Daniel Dennett. This is Daniel Dennett. Imagine his name, Daniel Dennett, right here. Searle and Penrose around this area. Chalmers is off screen that direction. But anyway, yes. They worry that if you go with materialism, then you have to go all the way with Daniel Dennett, which seems crazy. But if you don't go with Daniel Dennett, then you might have to go the opposite direction, some kind of idealism, which is Chalmers over here. So it seems like you can't do mind-body dualism because it doesn't really seem to make sense that we're both one or the other. So it kind of goes in the monisms of the materialism or the idealists. But Searle says, nah, you got more choices than that. You can go with some sort of, yes, everything is material, but consciousness can still be this thing because consciousness is sort of a tricky subjective thing. The reason why Daniel Dennett doesn't like consciousness is because consciousness is subjective. You can't feel my pain and such in my leg and whatnot. Is because you can't say much about it scientifically. But just because you can't say much scientifically doesn't mean there isn't some proof here and there for its existence. So Searle says there's some moderation. You don't have to take up a crazy Either we're like computers, or we're all consciousness, or we're all made of everything has consciousness view, things sort of that. And I want to bring up one last point. I don't have time.